In this demonstration, uh, I'm going to show you how to register an application. Here we are at the Microsoft Entra Admin Center at entra.microsoft.com. Now, before we go into registering the application here on app registration, there's a couple of things that it is good to check before we even do that. And it's if you click on users, and again, we are so normally when you come to Entra ID, it may you may come to a window like this, and we need to go into this Entra ID component. We're gonna go into users, and what I want to check over here is the user settings. And the reason I'm doing this is because although by default all users can register application, so this is turned on, that means that whoever is trying to create an application will succeed if this setting has not been changed. But obviously, if someone has come here and changed the settings and maybe change this, then unless you belong to a privileged group, you're not going to be able um, to do this. And by the way, a lot of company turn this off because you don't want everybody to be creating applications in your company. Well, it depends on the company, but many companies uh, control this by not allowing everybody to do that. So it's important to come over here. And um, since we are here, another setting is the restrict non-admin users from creating tenants. And normally you want to have that on. I don't I don't see any reason why you would have that otherwise. But again, companies are so unique. Every company, uh, it's unique, and there may be use cases in which you want users to create applications and tenants, but it's important to understand that. Some other user settings, since we are here, is the guest user access. Um, the default is that guest user access is restricted to properties and membership of their own directory objects, which is the most restrictive. And the most inclusive would be that guest users have the same access as members, unless the company is, there's a big parent companies and they have um, other companies, and then maybe you want the guest. In other words, if a parent company have another company where the users are in another tenant, and you want to bring those users as guests to your tenant. So let's say there is a tenant A, but tenant A also owns a company whose tenant is tenant B and tenant C. Then again, there may be use cases, but you control that over here. When it comes to the administration center, restrict access to Microsoft Intra Admin Center. You can set that over here. And if you click on this little bubble, this will give you information about what the setting does. So in this case, use the switch to prevent users from misconfiguring the resources that they own from the Microsoft Intra Admin Center. This is not a security measure. Um, so now let's non-administrator browse the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Yes, restrict um, restricts that. So non-administrator from browsing the Microsoft Admin Center. Again, so not necessarily related to the topic of application registration that we are here for, but since we are here in this user settings, I thought that it was important to take a look at these things. In the LinkedIn account connections, as some of you may know, LinkedIn is a Microsoft company as well. And as you know, if you are so in our case, we can use our work or school account to connect to LinkedIn. If a company uses LinkedIn for training and they want users to connect to the work account with LinkedIn, then you can turn that on, and that's the default. And again, some external settings are also configured here, and user features as well. We're going to see some of these things in future videos, but I just wanted to bring that up. The other aspect that I want to cover before we even get into the application registration component is the roles and administrators. Now, obviously, if you are a global administrator, you have all the access and then you can create applications. But I just wanted to point out that depending, you don't want to make a developer a global admin, of course. So application development and creation, it's mostly people in the business side and most and developers. So there are different roles. Here is the application administrator, which can create and manage all aspects of app registration and enterprise apps. And this is a really important topic for the exam because you can be completely sure that there are going to be questions about the roles and what the users can do. You have the application developer, which can create applications registration independent of the users can register application settings. So basically, meaning if you turn off the user can register application like we did previously, the application developer can do that anyways. Because the application developer is not a regular user. Well, in that case, if a user is a member of this role, it becomes a privileged user. Um, so I think that for the exam, the most important is the application administrator, the application developer, and the cloud application administrator. And the difference between the application administrator and the cloud application administrator is that this one can create and manage all aspects of app registrations and enterprise apps except for the app proxy. And we'll touch upon the proxy later on, but basically what that means is that if you have a company and it is a hybrid company and the company have application on premises and you want to bring those applications to be authenticated using the cloud, you can do that with app proxy. So if you need to manage, and this is again a testable question, if you have an application on prem and you want users to authenticate using Entra ID, a cloud application administrator cannot manage this piece. You would have to have an application administrator to do that. So just wanted to um, show those things there. So going back into the app registration, you're going to see enterprise. Once you register the application, then it'll come in here and then you can configure some things here. But normally we're talking about this, the app registration. And when you come here, you see a list of all the applications that have been created. You see a list of own applications. I mean, the user in this case, my application, the ones that I own. You see here a list of delegated applications if you have any, or deactivated applications. But what we are here for is to add a new registration. So we're going to click on new registration and we're going to give it a demo. I'm going to call this SC-500 demo app. So whatever the application name is. Then you need to choose the supported account type. So you're going to choose the account types that can use this application. And you have several. The first one and the most common is use single tenant only. In other words, only this tenant, only Contoso.com users and guests. I mean, if you have a guest, the guest can do that too. But only those users can access that application. And that's what we're going to be doing. But you also have multiple Entra ID tenants, as I was saying before, if you have a company with many tenants and you want users from those other tenants to access that, you can do that. If it's a public application and you want, anybody to use it, you can say the any Entra ID tenant plus the personal Microsoft accounts. The personal Microsoft accounts are something like at hotmail.com, at MSN, at outlook.com, and that kind of stuff. And if you only want personal account, then you can choose that. We are going to choose the single tenant only in this case. And then the redirect URI, which is optional, it depends on the application, um, basically will return the authentication response to this URI after successfully authenticating the user. So after the user is authenticated, then it will be sent to whatever you have there. Providing this now is optional and it can be changed later, but a value is required for most authentication scenarios anyway. So, and here you have public, client, native. These are mobile and desktop app. You get the single page application app, and then you have web apps. So let's use the web app over here. And again, whatever the web app is, if it's a web app, you have to use HTTPS and Microsoft JWJ, is it JWT.ms? I believe it's one that um, we can use from Microsoft for training purposes, but you could use basically anything. So it says register an app that you're working on here, integrate gallery apps or other apps from outside your organization. So again, it could be, the application could be anywhere. If you want to learn more about this, then you can click on enterprise applications, and then that will take you to the enterprise applications page. But I want to go back into what I was. Oh, and actually, it kicked me out. All right, so here we're back into, and once you do that, then you click on register. Take a couple of yep, couple of seconds, and there you go. So the application, it is now registered. Important thing here is the tenant ID. This is the tenant ID of your, actually, it kicked me up into, so what I want to do is go back into this application, and let me go to all application. This is the application that I just registered. So normally it will take you here to this part. And so here is the display name of the application that I just created, the application ID or the client ID. This is the piece that you would need in most cases to configure other pieces of the application. So you would need that. Then you also have an object ID that um, it may be used in some cases, but normally that's the object ID. So every application ID has an object ID. And then this is the directory tenant ID, which is the my tenant. This is the ID. If you go to the tenant, then you'll see that over there. So important information. The supported accounts type that we chose was my organization only, and again that can be changed at any time. Client credentials, we're gonna go into that. The redirect URIs. You can have multiple places, although this could become really complex, but you could redirect to uh, like a web app in a single page application or a desktop application, that kind of stuff. And again, the application ID URI, you can go there. So, and the state of the application, a lot of information there. Now, when we and again, so here you could delete it, you could deactivate it, and that kind of stuff. What can we manage here? If we go into the manage and then branding and property as the name go, so again, you can change a couple of things. You can add a logo picture, a homepage URL, which would be, normally the same URL that you added before. The terms of service URL, if your company has one, you may want to put that there. The privacy statement URL, which a lot of companies have those as well, and some other things. You can even include notes over here to explain what the purpose of this application is. Because sometimes the name of an application, people sometimes use generic names, and the name of the application doesn't mean anything to users. So you can add a note to do that. The publisher domain. Now I'm using the generic on Microsoft.com domain, and that is not supported. So that's why you get in that kind of stuff there. If you click on authentication, in authentication, you can see here again the what we just added, the redirect URI configuration. You can add more if you wanted to. This is what we added. In the supported account, you can change that over here. We chose the single tenant only option. And then here in settings, there's a couple of other things depending on the application, whether it is the access tokens, user for implicit flows, ID tokens. Application registration is a very complex topic, and there are so many pieces and so many things. And a lot of these things honestly make sense to a developer or the owner of the application. As an administrator, there's not many of these things. As a, let's say, cloud administrator, there is a developer, there is a cloud application administrator, and then there is the admin center administrator. But for the exam, um, obviously they're not going to go extremely deep in all these things, but it's important for you to know where those things are configured. If we go back into certificates and secrets, so what is this about? Well, credentials enable confidential applications to identify themselves to the authentication service when receiving tokens at a web accessible location using an HTTPS scheme, for example. For a higher level of assurance, we recommend using a certificate instead of a client secret as a credential. So, in other words, you have the choice to use either a certificate, client secret, or federated credentials, again, depending on the. So, certificates can be used as secrets to prove the application's identity when requesting a token, and also can be referred to as public keys. And this is kind of like the highest level of credentials that you could use. The client secret, it's basically a secret string that the application uses to prove its identity when requesting a token. Also can be referred to as application password. And sometimes this is easier if you don't have the certificate. It's a lot more involved because you need the administration of the application. I mean, when you are configuring this thing, if the application is in another company, another tenant, let's say that you are configuring Salesforce to be able to access the Entra ID and you want to use certificate, you need to work with the administrator of the Salesforce environment in order to get this thing. So sometimes, because it requires multiple teams to work on these things, um, it's not feasible to go with the best, or it depends on the company requirements anyway. The federated credentials allow other identities to impersonate its application by establishing a trust with an external OpenID Connect, for example, OIDC identity provider. This federation allows you to get token to access Microsoft Entra ID, protective resources that this application can access, like Azure and Microsoft graph, for example. And again, more information that here if you wanted to. But anyway, so those are the kind of things that the client secrets tend to be one of the most popular. So if you click on this, um, it you can enter a uh, you know a description here, whatever that is. The expiring, depending on the company as well. Let's use 1 year. Click on add, and then that would add a client secret. Now, important to notice that this is the client secret, and that client secret it's only showed once. So if you don't copy that and save it somewhere, you will not be able to see that again. Because remember, this is the secret ID, not the value, the secret ID. It's important to keep that in mind. So if you're gonna need that, you gotta make sure that you copy that. Otherwise, you have to use a different secret ID. You could create another one if you wanted to, but um, if that has already been configured, you need that secret ID to authenticate in the application. If you don't get that, you won't be able to do that. In the token configuration, this is for optional claims. Optional claims are used to configure additional information, which is returned on one or more tokens. So if you click on the choices here are ID, access, and SAML. If you click on ID, these are all the stuff that you can use. This is not commonly used, but again, depends on the requirements, um, you know, the of the company. But normally, company use the UPN, and that's it. In the API permissions, here we get the either the app permissions or the grant admin consent for Contoso. If it is high risk permissions, let's say that an application needs to read all the mailboxes and be able to delete mailboxes, or especially nowadays we're using agentic AI where agents can do stuff on their own. If it's a high uh, risk permission, then normally admin consent is used. If not, then you can use application, and this is where you would add that permissions over there. And there's so many, but let's say that we're working with Microsoft Graph. So you would come over here, and normally the two type of permissions are the delegated permissions. So your application needs access the API as the signing user. So there has to be a signing user. That's what it means. Application permission. Here, your application runs as a background service or daemon without a signing user. So that's the main difference. And you really need to know that um, the for the exam. When it comes to exposed an API, again, these are more advanced features. This define custom scopes to restrict access to data and functionality protected by the API. An application that requires access to parts of this API can request that a user domain consent to one or more of those, etc. And here you can add different scopes, or adding a scope here creates only dedicated permissions. If you are looking to create applications only scope, use the app roles and define app roles assignable to application type, and that kind of stuff. So the authorized client applications. Authorizing a client application indicates that this API trusts the application, and users should not be asked to consent when the client calls. It all depends again on the company. When it comes to roles, again, you can assign app roles or custom roles to assign permissions to users or apps. The application defines and publishes the app roles and interprets them as permissions during authorization. And again, you can click on create an app role, and here are the choices. Um, let's say that you're working with IT, for example, right? Maybe you want application permissions, or you want both group and user application permission. And here you would put the value. And if you have if you need to understand, like, what is it that you need, you can specify, this little bubble will give you some information. Okay. Anyway, we're not going to go into detail in these things, but just to um, show you. If you want to add owners to this application, then this is where you come. So let's say that I want Ciolito and the system admin to be owner to that, and then there you go. If you want to look at roles and administration, this is where you come. Um, so we're working with the cloud administrator, application administrator. We talked a little bit about this, and so I'm not going to go into details. And then finally, we're going to look at the manifest. An app manifest is a JSON representation of an app registration. So all the configuration, all the things that we did or that we saw, we can look at, from this JSON file. The Microsoft Graph App Manifest and the AAD Graph App Manifest below both represent the settings of this app registration. However, they are in different format. So you only need to update one app manifest and the system will automatically update that. So, if you want to save this, if you want to modify, you can download it. You can actually do it offline and maybe upload it. So anyway, so a lot of information when it comes to, we're not going to do that to this application registration. And then once your application is registered, then now you can go into this enterprise applications and you should be able to see those applications here. And here is the one that we just worked with. So you can click on that, and here you see all the things that, the like the name, the application ID, and some other configuration that you may want to, um, but you can see a lot of information to that application. And with that, we cover app registration and enterprise applications for the SC-500 certification exam. Thanks for watching, and um, hope that you follow me on my next episode.